Hi, this is Ryan with Camper Solutions, and today I'm going to go through the brief explanation of wiffle tree maintenance. The Coleman campers, the lift mechanism is done by cables and a screw, which is called the wiffle tree. There's three components to it. I'll be going through really the three components. There's the cables, there's the lock ratchet mechanism, and there's also the wiffle tree. First thing you always want to do before you start working on it is unlatch it, and all four are unlatched. Like I said, there's the three components: the cables, which we'll get underneath and look at, the wiffle tree, which is located on majority of them, it should be on the rear. You'll see the lift extension tube. Some people will have it up high, which is just a chain drive down to the lower. And right here, this nut is actually the ratchet. Inside this black box is where you have the ratcheting mechanism. What that is a brake pad, a pressure plate, which needs to be clean, free of dirt and grease. And you also have a little spring with a ratchet. In order to open that up, this one has rivets in it. So I'm going to have to drill out some rivets today. Oh, get the drill. Okay, I've chosen a drill bit that is just a little bit bigger than the rivet I'm working on. And there's the second one. Now you'll see the rivet on this one is still hanging out quite a bit. And the other one, you can see the back side of the pop rivet. I'm just going to get a pliers to pop that out. Actually, that one will come right out. This one will need a pliers. There we go, 2 clean holes. Now I do advise you to look into your Coleman parts manual in order to understand what we have going on here. We have the extension tube, which is actually threaded on. You can see nothing's moving. I'm moving the extension tube freely by hand, and nothing inside is moving. You have the ratchet right here in between this ratchet cog and the chain lengths is the pressure plate. My mechanism's working really nicely because I can move it freely, and I can get the pressure plate to move nicely. What I'll do is I'll actually get down under here. I'm going to shoot a little bit of brake cleaner on here just to make sure it's nice and clean. And just give the smallest dab of a lube, probably silicone lube, just on this ratchet to make sure that moves freely and the spring is greased. I do not want to contaminate anything else in this compartment. This right here is the thrust bearing. The mechanism it rides on is the drive shaft. In front of that is a large plate, and that is the wiffle tree cover. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is, because I'm doing the extraordinary maintenance, is I'm going to get a drive or a punch and actually remove this, which is what your crankshaft goes onto, so I can take off the extension tube. So I got myself a drive that is small enough, actually the perfect size to fit on that, and a hammer. Now this is a two-hand operation, and I'm just learning how to make videos, so here goes. Now I do not have to take this pin all the way out because all I'm trying to do is get a socket on that nut way down there. So I'll drive it out a little further. Next, I get my selection of sockets. Now, to tell you the truth, I couldn't get it figured out. So I went online, campersolutions.com, and got a link to my 2000 Grand Touring Series. And I'm looking at part number 13 to remove the extension tube. Look at 13. It's a 5/8 nut. 5/8. Fits right on. And I'm going to take that off. Hold the extension tube. Now within here, looking at the parts manual, I'm going to have a 13, which is the nut, a 15, which is a spacer, and a 14, which is a flat spring. I'm going to unscrew this completely. Got the nut in the socket. Gold extension tube. By hand, I just unscrew it because it's on a separate thread. Now, the way the Colemans work, they're kind of notorious sometimes. If they're overlifted or under set down, the threads inside the extension tube, there's actually a set of threads, may strip, or the threads on the drive shaft may strip. What you have is you have two threads. You have the first set that nut goes on that we just removed, and the second larger set where the extension tube goes onto. The nut is so the extension tube can't slide off when you back it off. As soon as it hits the nut, it starts lowering your camper roof, and when it goes on, it applies pressure to that pressure plate, which enables the ratchet mechanism to hold it up. So both sets of threads are quite important. Some people find that they can't lower the roof, and that's because the smaller set of threads has become stripped. And actually, the larger set of threads became stripped on this very end, and it's skipping. You still can raise the roof because it's got enough threads, but this probably is caused by people over lowering the rooftop. So now that I have that off, the reason I removed that is just so I can apply a dab of grease right here. You can see that I do have it greased up, but I like to do maintenance. So I'm going to shoot this with some brake cleaner. I'm going to shoot inside with some brake cleaner and wipe it down, apply a dab of grease here, apply a dab of silicone spray on the ratchet, and replace the rivets on it. Alright, cleaned everything with a little bit of brake cleaner. As you can see, the drive shaft is nice and shiny. My threads look good. I shot a little silicone spray, just a little bit, onto the spring of the ratchet on the inside, but not very much. And I sprayed away from the brake pad or pressure plate. Just gave a little shot there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just apply a dab of grease onto the drive shaft. Alright, there's my dab. Okay, probably more than a dab. The reason being for the grease on the drive shaft is this is actually the part that you want to come free when you're lowering your top. You need this to move freely and independently. See, I can thread it right on, and that's without having that 5/8 nut in there. And it threads right off if the 5/8 nut's not in there also. So I got a nice coating of grease on there. Grease is a little bit runny. I'm going to put another dab on just to be extra safe. Very happy with the nice uniform coating of grease on there. I have to snug it up so that I can put the nut back on. And again, this nut is the part that holds it from falling off. So if you're not threaded on, you might have to push it a little bit in order to get it started. And that's because we do have the spring and the spacer in there. I did not remove those, I just cleaned those. Shallow socket, but one thing you want to note is you do have a threaded side and a cap side. And this is so that this nut can only go so far on there and will not keep threading on. Alright, I got it threaded on. Feels good. And I'm just going to snug it up. This doesn't have to be outrageously tight, but it does have to be snug so it does not come off by itself. While you do that, if you do, you can actually start raising the top with this nut. And if you ever do get an emergency situation where your top's not going up, that is one option, is to get a socket with a 5/8 and try to raise your top that way. But I'm going to hold the gold extension tube by hand and snug it up. And right, I'm watching, I pounded the roll pin. It's just starting to come through. A couple more pounds. Alrighty. One thing I do advise is make sure you go get your handle and test this out before you put the cover plate on. But more than anything, so you can actually watch what's happening in that gearbox. So you understand when something breaks, maybe you have a fighting chance to know what it is. So I get underneath my camper. You can see the ratchet going up. When I stop, the ratchet will hold the top up. I'm going to crank my shaft backwards. That's going to loosen, and you can see it keeps loosening, nothing's happening. It loosens the pressure off the pressure plate. Now hit that nut on the back side, and now it's coming down, and without the pressure on the pressure plate, that ratchet's not holding anything. Now I can stop anywhere. I got a couple of free cranks on the handle as the pressure plate gets engaged, and the ratchet's back in there. Now I'm going to actually rivet this back on the cover plate because I have rivets and they're easy. Even drilling them out is pretty easy. I'm going to clean it because why have dust? And it's something I just finished cleaning. I already found the right size rivets. Put the plate back on. Now I have the rivets on both sides holding it on, and I'm just going to rivet one side in and switch the other side. If you've never used a pop rivet gun, they're really easy. Actually, quite economical and a convenient tool to have. You'll just think that's where the name of the pop rivet comes from, because it pops out. And the nail that you use to pull it through just falls right out of your gun. Go to the next one. And the plate's secure. We completed the maintenance on the gearbox with the ratchet. Next we'll be cleaning the cables and the wiffle tree.